All right, social media marketing world analytics tribe. Let's talk a bit about the most recent question we got, which is getting some basics down for social media marketers to get Google Analytics in a good enough place for social media marketing analysis. So a lot of this is going to be in configuration. Remember that what we want to do is understand how Google Analytics can be used for measuring the impact of social media. So let's go into config first. So if you are in the most modern versions of Google Analytics, it should look a lot like this. Your config is going to be this little button down here. First things first, goals. You absolutely positively need goals set up in the Google Analytics account. What are the tangible actions somebody should take that yields benefit, that tells us things are working in general for the account? So these are things from like newsletter subscriptions, purchasing a book, filling out a lead form, and things like that. But there are also other types of goals too. For example, I have as an intermediate goal visiting a certain page on a site. Now it has a much lower dollar value. It's like, worth a penny. But you want to set up goals and goal values. For e-commerce stuff, if you turn on e-commerce settings, which is down here, and you enable all of the pieces, then it'll handle the purchasing of things on the properties you're tracking. But there are still some other things where you will want to assign a goal value. So when you're assigning goal values, I typically do, if there are available obvious goals that match what you're trying to do, cool. If not, you can do custom goals. Set your goal. What's the destination? You can do a bunch of different types: destinations, durations, events, things like that. I use destination for thank you pages a lot because it's the most foolproof way to do it. However, if you've got a very complicated web app for a customer or for your brand, you may want to use events and tag manager, but that's a little more advanced for another time. And then third, the details. What are the values? So in this case, I have my thank you page, I have a URL declared, and I have a value for that. If you don't know what the value of any goal is, put a placeholder of $1. You can go back and change it later, but at least you want to have some kind of a placeholder that can help you infer the value of different actions. So make sure that you've got that in place. Second thing you're going to want to do, as I mentioned, e-commerce. If there's e-commerce involved, you want to make sure that all of that is turned on. You also want to look at things like channel settings. So there are these called default channel groupings that lump together things like what is search, what is social, etc., system-defined things. If you look, Google Analytics allows you to use their basic settings, but you may want to create your own custom channel groupings. So, for example, if I know that my custom social has source medium, and I know that, for example, I do a lot on Reddit. Well, Reddit's going to come in as referral traffic. Google will not automatically consider it to be social media, even though it is very much a social media site. So you may want to create a regular expression, which involves various versions of the Reddit URLs and stuff. You may also want to classify certain kinds of links as social media, otherwise they'll come in as referral traffic. So again, things like those t.co links would be a social media link because it's Twitter's link shortener. fb.me is a Facebook link shortener. So making sure that your channel groupings, if you are happy with the way Google does social media in its system definitions, keep it the way it is. Otherwise, feel free to add and tweak your channel definitions. You also want to make sure that you have your brand terms set up. So brand terms are things that are your brand, like my name, for example, so that Google can identify, especially in paid search, when we've got brand terms and that they're coming through correctly. In other things that you may want to do, you may want to define specific segments in your analytics if there are certain groups of people that are important to you. The same is true of annotations. Make sure that annotations, you have put in ones where you've made substantial changes to your website so that you know that you've done something. And when it comes to attribution models, you may want to incorporate additional ways to do attribution other than what is in Google Analytics by default. In Google Analytics, it has last touch, first touch, linear, time decay, and a few others. Those are ways to say who gets credit for what. So how does each channel, including social media, get credit for things? So if you want to experiment around, there are a bunch of different models that are available in the analytics gallery for free. I would strongly suggest you install Avinash Kaushik's Market Motive Mind-Blowing model. It's a very good model to have, but you can see there's all sorts of different attribution models that you can import into your analytics. So these are the things that are important just for getting set up to track social media appropriately. For your property settings, you'll notice, by the way, now that Google has switched over for tracking codes. There's this new thing called a G tag that actually uses Google Tag Manager. So all analytics by default now has Google Tag Manager built into it. However, if you want to kick it up a level, you should be using full-on Google Tag Manager, not the G tag. And so there is a ton of information within the analytics interface about how to do that. Go through and make sure that all of your tracking features are on. So data collection, remarketing, advertising, those are important things to have on. There are also referral exclusions. So, for example, you would almost always want to have your site being excluded from referring traffic to itself, your domain. It's a good way to avoid confusion when it comes in, when you've got stuff coming in. You can also add additional search engines if you do a lot of work, particularly with overseas search engines like Baidu and stuff. You can put them in here as well, and you can also change the default session settings for what constitutes a session. The defaults are 30 minutes and 6 months. I think those are perfectly fine for most companies. But for the campaign timeout, this should be governed by things like what's in your CRM. So if you have a 2-year sales cycle, or possibly longer, but at the very least 2 years is the max, then you'd want to increase those campaign times so that it matches the way things work. If you have Optimize and Tag Manager accounts set up, make sure that you link them here. It's really important to have that in place. And then in terms of audiences, if there are different audiences you can classify on your website, so like Facebook visitors, for example, you'd want to define those because you can pass them into systems like AdWords to advertise to them. So those are the basic setups that you would need in Google Analytics in order to make good use of it for social media marketing. In terms of what to actually do with that data, at the very least, let's go ahead and go to audience here. You'll want to set up individual channel segments for each social network and perhaps have a roll-up. So let's go ahead and look into some of my custom segments here that I've built myself. Facebook, for example, I have a Facebook segment here. Let's go ahead and look at the details on this. And you'll see I'm tracking Facebook, fb.me, onto fb.me, so any of these sources, and making sure I exclude. So if I'm doing Facebook paid advertising, make sure that you're obviously using the paid attribution campaign tags, and make sure those tags are tagged does not match PPC or CPC. You also probably want to have maybe a medium that matches doesn't match CPC as well. So that would look like this. If we do campaign and does not match regex. And so now this is, which is Facebook organic traffic, we'll call it. We'll make sure it's named appropriately since this is all organic traffic from Facebook. And now if I make the changes or just import them, I can then see how much traffic does Facebook send me. And it gives me a sense of who this audience is. Let's do another one here. I'm going to go ahead down to Twitter. And let's do Twitter. I'm going to rename that one too, so that's just a little bit more clear. I've already got the CPC stuff in there. So Twitter, organic traffic. And now we can see the difference between Facebook and Twitter in terms of what's working for my website. Now, I will tell you, this is not for everybody. This is not for how everyone should always do it. This is just my way of doing it for my site. And what this allows me to see is then, which of these different networks is driving more stuff. Let's do one more for fun. Let's toss in LinkedIn. You can see here my LinkedIn segments are missing. So I'm going to edit this one here. We're missing those organic exclusions. So let's do LinkedIn organic traffic. And we'll create a new segment here. Campaign. or Medium. Save that. So LinkedIn, in this particular, looking at this instance, I'm going, that's not really working so well for me. As I can see, that's well, I made a mistake. Let's go ahead and clean that up a bit here. Edit. Traffic. Source matches regex. LinkedIn.com. And campaign does not match regex. Does not match regex. There we go. Slight error there. Always double check your work. So now I can see LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, which networks are working for each of these. Now, in terms of things like content strategy, once I've got segments defined, I can then go and start looking at things like what content on my website resonates best with each audience. So if I pull this up here, the home page, which pages get the most traffic there. So this page, the lighter fluid post, gets a lot of Facebook traffic. The social media influencers post gets a lot of Twitter traffic, and then some LinkedIn traffic, and so on and so forth. So this can help me understand at a page level how my different forms of content are doing and which ones are the most popular. However, if I wanted to do this and have it be a little more sortable, because right now this is kind of oddly dimensionalized, I might want to use these segments, these custom segments, in a Google spreadsheet instead, and we can cover that another time. But for right now, this is how you get started being able to understand your content strategy when it comes to Google Analytics and having all of the basic baseline stuff in place. One last thing I'll point out is that when you go into multi-channel funnels to understand what happens with attribution, you'll need to set up conversion segments that are separate from your audience segments. So in this case, I have Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, and stuff like that, and I need to do very similar definitions as I did, but this is for measuring conversion specifically, which is different than measuring traffic. We can see here in source medium what are the different things that are driving value, and if you have those custom segments set up here in your channel groupings, you'll be able to see them reflected here. So in this case, Twitter, I can see what Twitter's economic impact is for me, what LinkedIn's impact, and what Facebook's impact is. So that's a third area to spend some time, is tricking out your conversion segments and then doing analysis by channel and by individual source medium to determine what's really working for you. So that's the basics of getting set up with Google Analytics for social media marketing. We've just scratched the surface, so please ask questions based off of this jumping off point, and let's see what else we can do to answer some questions while we're at Social Media Marketing World, or whenever you're watching this.